I want to take a caller here in the ReliefFactor.com studios who I'm told disagrees with me, but sounds like a reasonable young man. Jeff, is that true? How do you plead? Are you reasonable?
Well, I'm reasonable, but I'm not a young man. I'm 51, so.
You're younger. Oh, you're a pup. You're younger than me. All right, let's dive in because let's talk about the Biden gun control agenda and your points about the mass shootings.
Well, I was calling in about a couple things we could do that are logical, but I first wanted to correct the record. You let that young lady, I'm assuming she's young, there are plenty of mass shootings during Trump's era. I mean, does Dayton ring a bell? Does San Jose? I mean, I could go on and on and on. And she said that just a little bit ago, that there's only mass shootings when there's a Democratic president. No, that's not true. So I wanted to get that out of the way. I'm not sure
You're absolutely correct, and I do stand corrected. But I will say, and I will stick to my guns, proverbially, that if a Republican president took over and there were back-to-back mass shootings, they would lay this at the feet of that Republican president. You know it. You know what they'd be saying.
I'm not going to argue that point, but to say, and she was clearly saying that, well, no, I guarantee there's going to be a mass shooting coming up because it's a Democratic president. That's not true. It happened because we had some whack job out in Colorado who got a hold of a gun. I mean,
it's not fair to connect an act like this to a president of either party. You're right,
of course,
and I would agree with you.
But again, nothing to do with Dayton or San Jose or anything like that. They have nothing to do.
But again, we know what they'd be saying about a Republican president.
Gotcha.
We've had back-to-back mass shootings in the first few months of the Biden administration. And it's a little bit easier to connect the dots with immigration. Different topic altogether, but the migrants and the illegals, there's a reason, there's a cause and effect with this administration. But I would have to agree with you, and I will stand corrected. You're right. It's not fair to say that. Yeah.
I completely agree with you on the immigration. Biden has dropped the ball on this, and it's awful what's going on down there. I feel terrible for those kids. But beside the point. One thing I just want to say, everyone always says there's nothing we could do legally to stop any of this. Why don't we ever talk about limiting these high-capacity magazines? Why should anyone be able to go out and buy a magazine with 50 rounds or 100 rounds?
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Mike, maybe it wouldn't stop everything, but maybe it would give people time to take down someone with only 6 bullets in a magazine or 8 bullets.
The obvious answer is which of your digits do you want to give up when you talk about which right you're going to give up? And that to me is the best analogy. A ban, let me respond. A ban on a high capacity magazine, first of all, fails constitutional muster. There is there's a lot of reasons. First of all, constitutionally, and this is very, very important, and there is a reason for this. The Constitution, over and over, the Supreme Court has ruled the Second Amendment protects all arms that are commonly used by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. This is what, and they try to get, they try to get around that by saying, well, these are weapons of war. Listen, Jeff, you have to admit, all firearms are weapons of war. Single-shot pistols. Pistols.
If Adam Lanza only had access to a six cylinder or a whatever we call it, cartridge, then maybe a teacher would have had time, and maybe 10 kids could have been saved. Maybe in Dayton, if that kid didn't have a AR-15 with 50 caliber with 50. I know I'm not saying it right. Whatever it is, 50 bullets.
No, I know where you're going with it because
we have time, like because I can't go out and buy a bazooka.
Well, nobody's asking you to buy a bazooka because a bazooka isn't in common.
But why should I buy something that fires 30 rounds in 30 seconds?
Because it doesn't pass constitutional muster because there's a dubious constitutional. Listen, you got to hear what the law experts, what the constitutional experts argue. There's nothing unusually dangerous about an AR-15. In fact, a lot of people
you can fire 30 rounds in 5 seconds. I mean,
that's not that. Nice. First of all, that's not even necessarily true. Listen to
what I mean.
Listen, there's factory standard magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds, which are regularly used. Now listen, what would stop it? These are regularly employed by police departments.
Okay, then
Jeff, listen. Listen.
Not regular citizens.
You got to hear me here because you're not listening to me. You're just talking at me. I want you to hear what I'm saying. There are hundreds of millions. I'm giving you facts here, and I want you to hear some of these facts, and feel free to respond. But I'm giving you, I'm citing statistics and facts. In mass public shootings, first of all, the majority of shooters already bring more than one firearm. The average time frame between the start of the shooting and an armed response is such that a shooter has to spend several seconds reloading. That's effectively meaningless. Jeff, when they studied the Virginia Tech shooting, the use of such magazines, in other words, you're creating a boogeyman, you're creating a strongman argument. Wow. That when you say you want police officers to have a certain type of weapon that you don't want civilians to have, do you realize what gun owners hear when you say that, Jeff? Why do you want police officers to have something a civilian doesn't have?
Mike, if the government wanted to go to war with the citizens, it would be over pretty quickly. A civil war would happen if we tried to take anyone's guns. That's not going to happen. But can't we take common sense measures? It might not save everyone. It might not save half the people. But
we disagree about common. We disagree about what's common sense measures, Jeff. Why do you get to decide? Do you realize to a gun owner nothing you're advocating is common sense?
Because it's been pounded in their head that the black helicopter is going to be outside their door, knocking on their door, looking for their. That's what people think, Mike.
No, what people hear is
America, you don't know them. They are thinking that.
I don't know rural American. I don't know rural America. I make my living in rural America. I know. How many gun owners do you own? Do you know?
I know a ton. I know a ton of gun owners.
And go ahead and tell me. And what do your friends tell you?
That we should limit magazines. A lot of them limit.
So why is limit magazines the panacea for you?
Because it'll give someone a chance. Maybe it'll give a teacher in a schoolroom a chance while he's reloading after shooting 6 bullets, instead of Adam Lanza walking up and going doom 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 doom.
I mean, honest to goodness, you're using Adam Lanza as an example, and you're again the problem with your pro-gun control argument is that, and I'm not saying this. Yes, you are. Of course you are. That's what you're advocating. You're advocating.
I'm controlling guns. I'm controlling what's going into the gun.
That's a distinction without a difference.
That's
a distinction without a difference.
Not true.
I mean, first of all, I would
armor-piercing bullets.
And I would respectfully suggest to you, you know less about guns than I do, and I don't know very much. I think you'd admit that, right? You're not very well adept at knowing even the terminology. I'm getting blitzed right now with text messages. Jeff doesn't even know the phraseology, doesn't know the technical terms. And I'm not trying to attack you, Jeff. But if you're gonna,
why do people need 30 bullets in a magazine? Why?
Why do you feel a need? Why are you the arbiter of what people need or don't need?
Like Rambo and shoot a deer 30 times.
Why are you going to be the arbiter of what people need or don't need? Who are you to tell somebody what right they have?
I would think a parent that just lost their child to a person with an AR-15 who shouldn't have had one, maybe they care.
Because it's the AR-15. And if the person lost their kid to a shotgun, what are you going to do with the ammunition that goes into a shotgun, Jeff?
You're not going to stop everything, Mike. I could drive 125 miles an hour.
Oh, you're not going to stop everything. You're going to stop some of it, right? The Second Amendment, again, the Second Amendment protects the kind of thing you're trying to outlaw, Jeff.
There's 1776, Mike. There were not weapons of mass
I know. We also didn't have HBO in 1776.
And
Big deal.
Blacks weren't allowed to vote in 1776.
I know. Blacks weren't allowed. You're losing the arguments here. You know what you're doing. You're losing the argument.
Jeff, stop. You bring up the Constitution. We correct the Constitution.
Stop, please. I know you got to interview, and I know you got to interrupt to try to dominate this conversation. We can have a dialogue. You're resorting to ad hominem garbage because you're losing the argument. You are. The Constitution matters, Jeff. You ought to read it. You ought to read what constitutional scholars say about the Second Amendment as it applies. Let me finish a point. The Constitution is very specific, and the Second Amendment is very specific, where the Jeffs of the world don't get to determine what their neighbors get to have when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. You don't, Jeff.
Wonder if I want a bazooka. Wonder if I want that arm. Where's this? Why'd you stop it?
Nobody's. You're changing. You're changing.
No, I'm not.
You're changing the. You're changing the argument. You're changing the argument because you're.
Right now? It's a rule.
If you'd stop talking, I'd give you an answer. You're changing the argument because you know nobody's advocating for a bazooka. It's a straw man argument. It's an emotional argument. You're emotionally charged with your rhetoric, and you're not respecting the Second Amendment or what real gun owners who know the law and know guns are saying. There's nothing you would propose that will make Americans safer, Jeff. Nothing. Nothing. There's lots of steps.
If we stopped with the magazines, with these awful 50 whatever, and I don't know the lingo, I just know that you could put 50 bullets in a magazine and fire. If the guy in Vegas,
it's not even that. That's not even factually correct what you just said. I've got 27. I've got 27 texts right now that say you don't even recognize how the magazines and the capacity works. Now, Jeff, listen, and we're both at sort of a disadvantage because I don't know any more about guns than you do. I believe in the Constitution where you don't. I believe in the right to keep and bear arms where you don't. And so, honestly, with the magazines, it sounds real simple to you, and you say, why do we have to have multiple magazines? It's also about a gun control loophole. Look at your digits and decide which finger you're going to give up, because in your case, you don't mind losing your pinky and your index as long as you can keep the other 8. And that's how I hope you'll frame the Second Amendment and that important Constitution. Jeff, I appreciate the exchange.